The New England EFC works in the 6 New England states. We also have some national projects. The SNEP Network is a collaborative effort that I am really proud to be part of, as it is a unique national model that includes a cohesive set of on-the-ground technical assistance partners who are intimately involved in providing the direct assistance that communities need to address their very specific needs. Today's webinar is a great example of what we live to do, and that is to assist with navigating the complex requirements of funding proposals and to try to set communities up for success. And now I'd like to introduce my friend and colleague, Joanne Throw, president of Throw Environmental, one of the many great partners working with the SNEP Network. Throw Environmental also serves as a technical liaison for the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation's National Coastal Resilience Fund. We're thrilled to bring this funding opportunity to our municipalities here in Rhode Island. We're also pleased to partner with the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank. They serve as an important partner to advancing climate resilience in Rhode Island. We appreciate the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank being part of the SNEP Network Advisory Committee, and we welcome their involvement in today's event. And now I will turn it over to Joanne.
Thank you, Martha. I really appreciate that. And thank you to the SNEP Network. If you aren't familiar with the SNEP Network, please visit the website, snepnetwork.org. Just some amazing organizations that are part of this network. And Throw Environmental is really pleased to be part of that. Also very pleased to be part of NFWF's National Coastal Resilience Fund. We are, as Martha said, we serve as technical liaisons to NFWF's program here. And we're going to talk about this today with you. We're going to give a brief overview. If you could, you have more questions, we're going to try to get to as many as we can today. Hopefully all of you have brought a few project ideas and going to join us for our Zoom room conversations where we really talk through some of your project ideas. We have that amazing guest with the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank joining us. So we'll hear from Sean after our presentation. Sean O'Rourke is here. I don't know if he needs, go back to the first slide. I'm going to introduce, I was not going to go to my slides yet. Yeah, just stay there for a second. So I just want to talk a little bit about NFWF and this Coastal Resilience Fund in a moment. But what I want to do is just lay out the team here. As Martha introduced the Southeast New England program, looking at the network and who we are, we've got some fine people here today. So you met Martha. She is the New England Environmental Finance Center Director and just doing an amazing job managing this network. Elizabeth Scott, she is our Rhode Island liaison for the SNEP Network, and she is here through Elizabeth Scott Consulting. Pang Sutasombat is our project manager for the New England Environmental Finance Center for the SNEP Network. And we have Tess Clark. Tess is with the Syracuse, it's the Region 2 Finance Center. And then Leah Soloway is policy assistant managing our webinar today. So next slide. I want to introduce the team of Throw Environmental, who you'll be hearing quite a bit from today. This is part of the team managing the NFWF fund. So you met me, Joanne Throw, president of Throw Environmental, also a senior fellow at the University of Maryland, where I've been working very closely with Dan Neese, who is a project partner in Throw Environmental. I've got the amazing Kyle Gray with Throw Environmental, who is graduating with his master's from URI, and boy, countdown is maybe a month or so. And Taylor Throw, great last name. Yes, there is a connection here. And Taylor is on the business end, but she is the one as the point person for NFWF running the show for us this morning and on all the projects nationwide for us. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we have Sean joining us, and what an amazing opportunity when we start talking about resilience and coastal resilience, the work that Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank is doing with the municipal vulnerability, or I'm sorry, the municipal resilience program. And we're going to hear a little bit about where they are and where the opportunities are for us today. So let's go to that next slide. And I want to talk a little bit about specifically to lead into the Coastal Resilience Fund. So you probably have seen many NFWF programs over the years, their funding opportunities, and they are expanding. Honestly, NFWF, I've been working with them, Dan and I, maybe Dan back since 2005, working very closely with NFWF, and they are, so folks, go ahead and please mute if you can. I'd appreciate that. So NFWF was created by Congress back in 1984, and they are probably the largest private conservation grant makers. They work closely with public and private sectors. Their goal is to protect and restore fish, wildlife, plant, and habitat for future use. They've had various programs. So I've heard people say that if, NFWF, their programs don't quite fit for us, if you've tried before, please give this another try. Our focus, even though Throw Environmental is working on this nationwide, we really have some focus areas in the next few years, and Rhode Island is one of them. So we really want to work closely. We're located in Rhode Island, and this is an opportunity we want to bring to you. So right now, this year, this fund is really growing. So $34 million are anticipated that's going to be available for this year. And it is about coastal resilience projects, and the whole goal, providing communities with enhanced protection and buffering from impacts of sea level rise, changing flood patterns, coastal erosion, increased frequency of storms, intensity of storms, and I'm not saying or, but I'm saying and the protection and restoration of habitat for fish and wildlife. There has to be that direct connection to both. And so we are encouraging you probably throughout this presentation to go back to nfwf.org/coastal resilience. There's so many tools and resources that you can use when you're thinking through. Today, I just want to remind you, this is again going to be short. It's a summary. Full long presentation with Q&As is available on their website, but we just really want to introduce it just to Rhode Island today. So with that, I'd love to turn it over to Taylor Throw. Taylor, are you ready to go?
Yes, I am.
Let's see. I think I might have another slide, Tay. Is there another one there?
Nope,
Oh, nope. Okay, this is for you. All right, Tay, take it away.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. Thank you for that intro. So first, I'm just going to go over who is eligible for the NCRF. Eligible entities for the National Coastal Resilience Fund include state, tribal, and territorial government agencies, municipal governments, nonprofits, educational institutions, and commercial organizations. Ineligible applicants would include federal agencies or employees of federal agencies, foreign organizations, foreign public entities, and unincorporated individuals. And just to keep in mind, programs that have dual standing as partially federal, like say you are a Sea Grant, for example, you can apply, but you would just need to be careful around the rules of matching funds. And eligible applicants that would like to partner with a federal entity for the implementation of their project are encouraged to do so and should provide a letter to support if their role is significant. So here are just some FAQs around eligibility. One common question is, can I submit multiple applications? And the answer is yes, an applicant or organization may submit multiple applications and may receive multiple awards. Another common question is, if I have a previous NCRF grant, am I eligible to advance that project or propose a new project under the 2021 grant? And the answer is also yes. Current or previous grants would not impact your eligibility, so you can essentially submit again. And lastly, if you are on the list of eligible entities who can apply, everyone enters on equal footing. So here are just a few things to keep in mind. One is matching funds. A minimum 1-to-1 non-federal match in cash or in-kind services is expected and strongly encouraged. There is no priority given to higher cash percentages, and a match should be specific to the scope of work that is being proposed. Another common question we get is, when do matching funds need to be secured? And you would provide the match with the proposal application, and the matching funds would have to be expended within the period of performance of the project being proposed. In many cases, you would be able to backdate your start date to June 1st of 2021 in order to capture matching funds specifically. Some examples of in-kind matching funds that folks have used in the past would include things like volunteer time, discounted fees for services, donated goods and services, or things like labor, space, vehicles, training, supplies, events, equipment, or travel, etc. The second thing to keep in mind is permitting. So compliance with federal, state, or local requirements and obtaining all necessary permits and clearances are the applicant's responsibility. So I'm just going to hand it over to Kyle now, and he's going to discuss and go into more depth about the priorities for the proposal.
Sounds good. Thanks, Taylor. Yeah, so Taylor just went over what was eligible for the NCRF. These are going to be, what I'm going to go over will be the project priorities. So these are, components of projects that would make you more competitive within the NCRF for the 2021 year. So if we can go to the next slide, we'll see kind of an overview of all the different categories that we have. First off, we have community capacity building and planning, and then there are 3 project level grant categories. So we have project and site assessment and preliminary design, final project design and permitting, and then restoration and monitoring. So as proposals are submitted for the NCRF, you would pick one of these categories based on the outcome that you're hoping for. And just a few things to note. Projects should have already been identified as a priority through some prior resilience planning effort. Projects should make significant progress in the year 2022. Innovative projects that are reshaping how we think about resilience in light of some environmental stressors are certainly welcomed. And then finally, projects that utilize traditional design approaches are also welcome. So on this next slide, we'll see, again, kind of an overview of all 4 priorities, and we'll go through these one by one. So next slide, we'll start off with the first category, and that's community capacity building and planning. So we anticipate that projects in this category include engaging stakeholders and building that capacity to plan and execute a variety of future resilience projects and activities. Projects in this category include a prioritization of natural and nature-based features, and therefore that will make them more competitive. Projects in this category usually last around 24 months, and the outcome here is that comprehensive resilience plan that would move you forward in this pipeline. And this is a good point to note. This idea of a pipeline for these 4 different categories is really to help facilitate this process, but it's not required. So assuming that you get a grant in the first category, this doesn't require or mean that you would get a grant in the second, third, and fourth categories in the coming years. It would really just help to work to move you along and kind of structure that approach a little bit better. So on the next slide, we'll see an overview of site assessment and preliminary design. So applicants in this category can request funding to complete assessments and preliminary designs of best options to address restoration and community resilience goals. Projects in this category should have previously prioritized and identified a community through that resilience plan that we kind of laid out in step 1. But that should still be under consideration to determine the most appropriate sites for a project, right? So that's the kind of the fundamental piece of this category. Competitive grant applications in this category will focus on one specific effort, not an assessment of an entire coastline. Projects in this category will last around 12 months. Again, that outcome is the preliminary design, and there may be some baseline monitoring included in this one. On the next slide, we'll move on to final design and permitting. So whereas the second category gets you to 30 to 60% design, the outcome here would move you over to 90 to 100% design. Right, so applicants in this category can request funding to support that final project design and permitting for on-the-ground efforts. And this would really work to position projects for restoration-ready implementation in the final stage. Again, the outcome would be 90 to 100% design, and there may include some baseline monitoring here as well. In the final category, we have restoration and monitoring. So this is, kind of the end goal for all of this, right? This is where the project actually gets on the ground and, and starts moving forward. The projects here could take up to 3 years, and there would be an additional single year of monitoring. And the outcome is implementation and that monitoring piece. So projects here should have already been prioritized through the formal planning process, and they should have already completed all the necessary designs, and there should be a good understanding of the permitting. Projects should also advance resilience goals as well as conservation and community goals too. We think about those as the fundamental pieces to the NCRF. So that's an overview of all the categories. If we go into the next slide, we can see a little bit more information that carries through each of those buckets. So in the RFP, which is online, we'll share a link to that with you as well. They go over timeframes, average request amounts, project scale guideposts, all of these components that are kind of typical to the average application going into each category. Again, these are not hard and fast rules or anything. It's really just to give you a sense of how each project in each category is typically faring and to give you some framework to work within. We also want you to understand your efforts around community engagement, right? So critical to the NCRF is that community engagement piece, and the clearer that is made to the reviewers, and the more evident that piece is, the more competitive a project proposal will be. And along the same lines, it's important to be specific about community and habitat resilience benefits. So again, the clearer that connection is made, the more you make that connection to the evaluation criteria, the easier it will be for the reviewers to review your application and kind of assess its competitiveness. I also want to go over on the next slide what is not a priority. So these aren't necessarily projects that are ineligible for the NCRF, but ones that aren't necessarily prioritized or won't be as competitive going into the 2021 year. So coastal community rebuilds from storms are not typically viewed as competitive for this grant. Standalone research projects, as well as small scale or isolated projects, are not seen as competitive. So we can think about this with the example of culverts. A single culvert is not going to be competitive on its own. However, if there were multiple culverts in a comprehensive project across a watershed, that might be a little bit more competitive. But that would just require that connection is made clearer for the reviewers. And then finally, non-natural structures won't be as competitive as hybrid or green structures. On the next slide, I'm just going to go over a couple resources, and we'll share, again, links with all of these to you folks. So on the next slide, you'll see we have some deadlines and some contacts. So as you know, the pre-proposal due date is coming up soon. It's April 7th. It's only a 2-page application, and that'll be due by midnight on April 7th. Full proposal invitations will go out in mid-May, and then there will be a subsequent webinar similar to the pre-proposal one on May 26th. For those folks who are invited to the full proposal, that deadline will be June 23rd by midnight, and awards will be announced in late November. If there are questions about project ideas, you can contact Amanda Basso. This is her email on the screen, and again, you'll get a copy of that, but she's overseeing the Northeast region for the time being. On the next slide, you'll just very quickly see an overview of how to apply for this grant. So it all works through easygrants.nfwf.org. As you might expect, you register, you apply, click through the apply for funding, you find the RFP, and you make your way through the application step by step. We won't be going over that Easy Grants process today. However, in that pre-proposal webinar that you'll have the link to, they do a thorough job of going through, step by step and showing you how to navigate Easy Grants. 2 tools that we will be going through today, though, are the NCRF footprint and the CREST tool. So the first one is what you see here, and that's the footprint. And I'll go through that with you in a moment. But the footprint really lays out what is eligible for the NCRF. So any of these areas in orange that you see are ones that are predetermined to be eligible. And quite obviously, you see that it follows the coast. So we see that coastal Huc 8 watersheds that drain to the ocean or the Great Lakes, or Huc 8 watersheds that are low-lying or tidally influenced, are all eligible for the NCRF. So we'll dive into that briefly in a moment, but first I want to go over the second tool, which is the Coastal Resilience Evaluation and Siting Tool, or CREST. And CREST really focuses on these ideas of resilience hubs. So it puts together a number of different indices and compiles them all together for this resilience hub, which is an area where natural restoration efforts will have the greatest impact for human community resilience, as well as for fish and wildlife. So again, those do benefits. Projects for the NCRF grant don't need to be in a resilience hub to be eligible, but it's a useful component to know when you're planning a project, and it serves to make a project more competitive. So I'll be going over that in a moment, and we also have a link here, just so you know, for the RFP and the tip sheet. I'm going to share my screen and we can go over some of these different tools. All right, so can everyone see this?
Yes, Kyle.
Perfect. All right, thanks, Joanne. All right, so first up, we have the CREST tool. And obviously, we're zoomed in on Rhode Island. And again, this is just showing you what is eligible for the NCRF, right? This isn't necessarily saying where projects will be more competitive or not, or where projects will be guaranteed. This is what actually fits within the rules of the NCRF. Predetermined to be eligible are all the areas in orange, so we see most of Rhode Island is. You will note that down here in Narragansett Bay, a lot of the islands and the coves seem to be outside of the eligible area. I really think this is just a GIS issue. We see some kind of hard, rigid lines here that aren't really going into the coves and the various nooks and crannies of the state. So don't worry too much about the Narragansett Bay communities, as they're very clearly coastal, but we can work through that with any questions. I will note, though, that Northern Rhode Island, as you can see, is not predetermined to be eligible for the NCRF grants. Now, this doesn't necessarily eliminate anyone in Northern Rhode Island from being eligible, but it does make the case for eligibility a little bit tougher. So what you would have to show in order to prove eligibility would be coastal stressors that are really stressing the challenges in your community. So you would have to make that connection to the coast a little bit clearer than those that are already predetermined to be eligible. With any questions on that, definitely feel free to reach out and we can help you navigate that process. And with that, I will move on to the CREST tool. So again, we just saw what was eligible. This idea of the CREST tool and the Resilience Hub works us towards what is more competitive as a project. So as you can see on the right, we have a number of different indices that all factor together towards this idea of resilience hubs. Things like community exposure, there'll be a fish and wildlife index as well. And these all are just different overlays that show up on the map of Rhode Island, and they'll show you areas that through a number of different metrics, they've been measured to be more sensitive for specific topics, right? So some areas will be more sensitive to community exposure, others to these other components over here. And altogether, these factor into that resilience hub, and these are areas where resilience projects have been predetermined to be found to be more effective. So again, projects don't have to be focused in resilience hubs, but keeping them in these, the darker orange, the better, really works towards landing on all of those resilience goals as best as possible. So this will definitely be a tool to play around with. It's very interactive for the entire state. And by focusing projects on these hubs, you can see where competitiveness will start to be a little bit more easy to gauge. So with that, I think that's all I have on the tools, and I will hand it back over to Joanne to move us along.
Wonderful. Thank you. Kyle and Taylor, I appreciate that. Now, if you have any specific questions, reach out to Taylor to start with, and Taylor can make sure she manages your direct questions. Taylor at throw-environmental.com. We'll share information after this presentation. And Kim, I realized my hand was blocking introducing you, and I'm so sorry I did that. My apologies. Kim Groth Kim is part of the SNEP Network, an important part, and she manages the Massachusetts. She is our liaison there, and Kim Groff has been kind enough to help us out today. She'll be working in our breakout session. So Kim, my apologies. Sean, we have some good opportunities here with the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank. Sean is not just the climate resilience officer and everything climate change, and we really appreciate your work with the communities and the MRP program. And you have a colleague here today as well, don't you? I'll turn it over to you, but make sure we introduce her as well, because she'll be part of today's breakout rooms. So thank you. I'll turn it over to you, Sean.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joanne. Thank you to the Pulse SNEP Network and everyone else for the opportunity to join you today. This is exactly the kind of forum that we want to be having, that builds on all of the terrific work that's going on within the Municipal Resilience Program and many other programs all across Rhode Island. The fact that we have over almost 40 participants today with such short notice really shows that people are ready to act, and we've got projects to do. We need funding and we need capacity, and so I'm so thankful for Joanne for your leadership on this and willingness to kind of put Rhode Island first and make sure we get some good projects that we can put forward. So I'm going to try and share my screen here. My file's not coming up, of course, as I was staring at it for the last 15 minutes here. Give me 1 second.
Sure. And while you do that, as people are thinking about questions, after Sean's done, we're going to do a Q&A, a brief Q&A. So please start putting it in the chat as we move along.
All right, let's try this. Sorry, everybody.
It's all right.
Best laid plans. Here we go. Are you seeing that?
No.
Oh, here we go.
Sean, what would you, how
Okay,
can we
here
help?
we go.
Oh, good. You got it.
All right, how's that looking?
Oh, that's great. Go for it.
All right, thanks, Joanne. All right, sorry about that, everyone. Little suspense. I also want to introduce my colleague at the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank, Kim Koryoff, who you'll have a chance to hear from in a few minutes. She's been absolutely instrumental in her short time at the bank in helping kind of bring this program forward and working with actually on the line here today. So we're going to give a quick overview of MRP. Many of you are frequent flyers of this program, and so we won't go into all of the nitty-gritty details. But just wanted to present what we've been hearing across the first 13 communities. Talk about the next 6 communities that we're going to be working with, and I would like to put a plug in that almost 50% of Rhode Island is participating in this program now, and so finding ways to fund these projects really is that carrot to get more municipalities to the table to participate in this program. So the Municipal Resilience Program seeks to accomplish a whole host of activities. One of the first things it looks to do is provide a shared understanding of hazards. And we are in Rhode Island, a coastal state. We are the ocean state, but we also have a ton of inland hazards as well. And I was thrilled to see that this funding and grant opportunity not just includes the pure coastal communities, but also looks at Rhode Island more comprehensively. And I think that that's a real benefit to our state. And so not only are we identifying what is vulnerable in terms of assets all across Rhode Island, but we're also looking at ways to identify projects, plans, and policies that are in direct response to help build the local climate resilience of these communities. And we're doing that in combination with the Nature Conservancy. They've been a tremendous partner with the bank on delivering the community resilience building workshops. And so they work with the communities hand in glove to work with a core team. They run a workshop, a municipally focused workshop that identifies those key hazards, key priorities. And then the Infrastructure Bank over the first 2 years has funded over $2.5 million worth of action grants, really to get this program started. And that in turn builds this whole pipeline of projects, which you'll see about in a minute. The thing that we are particularly excited about, and this is in addition to funding projects on the ground, is the fact that we're now getting better visibility on what needs to be done all across Rhode Island. And I tell the story all the time. I used to get asked by the governor all the time, like, well, how much do we need to do? And I'd say a lot. And that's a terrible answer. And so we're now actually starting to put some meat on that answer and actually start to look at specific projects across communities and what it would cost to get these projects done. And so that MRP project pipeline is exactly what we want to be linking with this work here today and this NFWF funding opportunity. So in 2019, we worked with 5 municipalities, identified 52 total projects with just under $15 million in total need. Again, 2020, 8 municipalities, almost 150 projects, about $70 million in need. Thrilled that we now have Cumberland, East Providence, Jamestown, New Shoreham, Providence, and North Kingstown coming on for the 2021 round, and we just announced those communities. And to date, and Kim has been doing tremendous work on culling these lists of projects and looking for kind of implementability or actionable projects. And so we've identified a total of 201 community resilience projects. But of those 201, we have about 144, just under 150 projects that we think are geographically specific, ready to move forward, and have the pieces in place that really this funding could be appropriate for. And so finally, my last slide before I turn it over to Kim is we wanted to give a snapshot into what are we hearing from all of you in your communities through these workshops. And you can see this graph here of the types of projects or the typologies of projects that are being unearthed. Stormwater management, no surprise, comes up most frequently. And I think a lot of this is due to the fact that each community, coastal and inland, are all dealing with different types of stormwater issues. And where it rains, it can flood. And this has been one of the key connection points to not only working with coastal communities, but also the inland communities that have been developed over centuries along rivers and corridors that are, they're downtowns and mills, we're the center of economy, and now have undersized culverts, and we're seeing even sunny day flooding occur. And so that has been one of the key things we've heard in every single workshop. Infrastructure upgrades such as road elevations, working with wastewater treatment plants, and so on. Coastal restoration and erosion control projects have come up in every single, no surprise, every single coastal workshop. Backup power at critical assets and facilities is something else that has come up, and we were thrilled to see Barrington and Warren, who did a really terrific joint municipal resilience program process, submitted a proposal to DEM for backup power across both municipalities, recognizing that every facility would need backup power at the exact same time. And so being able to share resources across municipalities, hooray, sharing resources across municipalities, but we need to do more of that. And then finally, vegetation management. This is something, again, that is woefully underfunded all across Rhode Island. There is no direct allocation, and if there is any at the local level, it's like $20. But we're seeing now Rhode Island being in a complete wind envelope with increasing storms. We're seeing blowdown from aging trees that have been not managed properly over the last generation, and so it's having direct impact on our roads, bridges all across Rhode Island. And so that's something else that we wanted to be able to find new ways to fund. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kim to talk a little bit more about some of the work that we're doing with the communities. Kim?
Yeah, thank you so much, Sean. So as Sean mentioned, there are a number of project typologies that have been introduced through the MRP process that we've identified, and we've started to make a dent on funding some of those. As you can see here, the bank has already committed $2.5 million in action grant funding to 24 projects over 2019 and 2020, and has also catalyzed over $6 million in funding outside of this bank to support an additional 8 MRP identified projects. As you also probably heard recently through the Beach Clean Water and Green Economy Bond, we've also been able to allocate another $7 million to MRP identified resilience projects. And over to the right here, you can see the distribution of the projects that have already been funded, mainly stormwater management. I know it's cut off a little bit on the screen, but mainly stormwater management and coastal restoration, but also some dam repair and removal, infrastructure upgrades. We're talking mainly clean water and drinking water here. As well as, oh, we're back. Okay. Oh, thank you so much. It looks like the slides are good now. As well as backup power and dredging. Next slide, please. Thanks. So on the other hand, while we've been able to make a dent in some of the funding for these projects, there are a number of actionable projects that still need funding. And you can see here the top 5 MRP project types by their total estimated need, a number of clean water and drinking water and stormwater management projects, as well as some road improvement, coastal restoration, and backup power. Keep in mind there is much more than this as well. This only accounts for 27 million of the nearly 85 million that Sean was mentioning earlier in this presentation. So there definitely is a lot of need out there for funding for these actionable project types. So in response to this, the bank has been taking a number of steps to try to find some funding to allocate to these projects that need it, and even beyond funding within the bank. So Sean, if you want to jump to the next slide. We've been looking at a number of grants as well, and one of them, of course, is what we're talking about here today, NFWF's National Coastal Resilience Fund. And I know we've already gotten a bit of an overview, but I'll circle back here with a little bit of a summary, that the National Coastal Resilience Fund aims to restore natural systems, to increase protection for communities from coastal storms, sea and lake level changes, inundation, and coastal erosion, while improving habitat. And of course, as we've already discussed, there are the 4 key priority areas: community capacity building and planning, site assessment and preliminary design, final design and permitting, and restoration and monitoring. If you want to flip to the next slide. Thank you. So in response to this, we've dug into this grant a bit more and tried to find some overlaps with MRP identified project typologies. And of course, this has to be evaluated on a project by project basis, but we've tried to identify some good overlapping project types, as I mentioned. So we have brownfield restoration, coastal restoration and erosion control, dam removal, if it involves some restoration as well, infrastructure upgrades, and we were thinking primarily things such as planted flood protection berms, road improvements involving green infrastructure, sea level rise and stormwater management, as well as vegetation and watershed management if it's resulting in a project. So thank you so much for tuning in, and let us know if you have any questions on that.
Oh, okay. I'm appreciative of your time. Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank. Sean, thank you so much. You always do such a fantastic job. And Kim, it's great to meet you. Welcome. And what I want to do right now.
I just want to say thank you. And also another lesson learned is when I try and do any technology myself, you see what happens. So I should have let Kim do it.
No,
sorry about that.
Was great.
Sorry about that, everybody.
Sean, would you be able to make those slides available to everyone if
Absolutely.
we share them, or is that okay? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll send them to you. Yep.
Okay, terrific. So for those who are asking in the chat, we'll go ahead and make that available along with our presentation as well. All right, what we're hoping to do now, before we go into breakout rooms, which I will describe shortly, let's just take a few minutes between everything you've heard from the Throw Environmental team about the NFWF program, and also from Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank, how it connects back to this fund, the National Coastal Resilience Fund. Feel free to either, if you want, raise your hand or just put it in the chat and we'll take some questions. Dan, you want to help me with a few questions here if I missed something?
Sure.
Okay. One thing I saw, and I know people focus on this, Dan, we've heard it often from the different states, is do they have to be in the middle of a resilience hub? Do they have to, put their project right there? No, it's a tool. It's a way to look, at how your project may fit in terms of the community index, the threats that Kyle talked about. And so if it's not within that hub, that's okay. Your project still, especially in Rhode Island, will be could be very competitive. So I don't want you to think because it's not there, it's not competitive. And really always put it back to resilience. So somebody asked about reef balls, and if reef balls somehow enhance resilience, then you can look to that. But if it's just a wildlife habitat restoration factor and doesn't connect back to community resilience, it's not going to be as competitive.
And the opposite is true. And so the rub is in highly urban environments on the other side. So real urban areas like Providence, East Providence, and others in Rhode Island probably won't be directly in the middle of one of those hubs, which requires you to have a really thorough explanation as to why the natural infrastructure is going to be beneficial to your community. It's obviously a relatively easy answer to give, especially as it relates to stormwater, coastal erosion, but so you have to, if you're in a very rural area, you have to explain how these natural infrastructure projects will benefit the community, even though there may not be a lot of people around. And the opposite is true in the urban environments. You need to explain how you're able to incorporate natural infrastructure, even though you may not be in one of those hubs.
Yeah,
Right.
Dan, can I just add on to that too? I had a question come in directly to me about the resilience hubs and this idea of like in more urban environments. And specifically, the question was about Providence, asking why Roger Williams Park was one of the only resilience hubs up in the Providence, Cranston area. And again, this would be because they're focused on the idea of open space, protected space. Those are where most of the hubs are located. So clarify and kind of piggyback off of what you and Joanne just said. Resilience hubs are a good way to, navigate this, and it's a good tool to use, but it's not the only, criteria you have to go by.
Yeah, and I would also say, look back at the 2020 awardees. If you're really thinking about the type of project or what stage you're in, go back to what they awarded, what was competitive, and you'll see across the country, it's very diverse in terms of, some are very innovative, very creative projects, but really connect back to that resilience factor. And I think that's a good opportunity for everybody on this call. And, we're, as I said, Throw Environmental, we're, part of the SNEP network. So we're going to continue to support the SNEP communities, but also through this NFWF liaison role, we really want to highlight the opportunities and bring them to Rhode Island. So with that, if there's no other questions I see coming in, Kyle, Dan, did I miss anything? Taylor?